science of philosophy teaches that human knowledge, the knowledge that we acquire as human beings, it comes to us through sense perception. It comes to us through the use of our senses. Jesus, of course, knew this, and so in today's gospel we see him appearing to his apostles in his resurrected body. What does he do? He invites them to see and touch his hands and feet, where the marks from the wounds of the crucifixion are. He invites them to listen to his voice, and as he speaks, even with their noses, we could say they could smell the fish that Jesus was eating right in front of them. All this info or data that they were taking in from their encounter with the Lord was meant to be a clear proof of his resurrection. And from their first-hand experience, then they could go out and preach to others that Jesus was risen from the dead. We hear the Apostle John say in his first letter, he says, "We declare to you what we have seen and heard, that you might have fellowship with us. And truly our fellowship is with the Father and with his Son, Jesus Christ." 1 John 1, verse 3. Again, the apostles could preach Jesus risen from the dead because they had direct, immediate experience of him. The knowledge of his resurrection came to them, again, directly through their external senses, through their encounters with him. So human knowledge comes through sense perception. John Duns Scotus knew this as well, and he added that the object of our intelligence, the object of our intellect, isn't material things per se, but it's rather being itself. It's whatever exists. He says in Latin, the ens in quantum ens. That was the Latin phrase that he would use. And since the object of our intellect is whatever exists, then our human intelligence is naturally open to God. The resurrected Christ helps to bridge the gap between what is seen and what is unseen, the gap between finite being, which is us, and infinite being, which is God, to put it in Scotistic terms. And Jesus bridges that gap again in a very concrete, a very tangible way by appealing to our senses, by speaking to our senses as he did with the disciples in today's gospel. This is one of the reasons why as Catholics our churches have statues and paintings and music and incense and candles and stained glass and bells and procession. Why? Because all these created realities are meant to grab our attention. They're meant to speak to our senses, to point our senses to the greater reality of God and the things of God, to the greater reality of the things that are unseen. The greatest gift that Jesus has left us in this regard is the gift of the Holy Eucharist. All of our senses converge, they all come together, seeing, hearing, tasting, touching, smelling, they all converge on the Holy Eucharist, on God once again made present to us in a miraculous way. Even at the beginning of today's gospel, we heard that the disciples, quote, came to recognize him, they came to recognize Jesus in the breaking of the bread, St. Luke said in Luke 24, verse 35. That's where we are now called to recognize Jesus as well. The knowledge of God is meant to come to us through faith, which comes through hearing, one of our 5 senses, as the apostle tells us in Romans 10:17. But it also comes through the perception of all of our senses, and that's what happens when we receive the gift of the Holy Eucharist. And it's through the Eucharist that we will eventually one day receive those gifts or properties which belong to the glorified body of our risen Lord. We'll receive the gifts of a glorified body if we first worthily receive the body of Christ present in the Blessed Sacrament. As Jesus himself said in John 6:58, he said, "The one who eats this bread," referring to the Blessed Sacrament, "the one who eats this bread will live forever." So today on this Easter morning, let's ask Our Lady, who's already glorified in heaven, both body and soul, let's ask her for a greater love and devotion to her Son present in the Blessed Sacrament, so that we too can one day fully participate in the glory that she and her Son are now experiencing, a glory which includes not only our souls, but also our bodies as well.